Good morning, Tracy Holsinger, Thusitha Jayasundara. It's my pleasure to welcome you both to my channel. And the pleasure is manifold because both of you had been my juniors at school. So in a way, I've seen you from childhood grow up. Tracy, I have seen quite closely because I followed her career in Sri Lanka. Thusitha, I hardly saw you since a child till you became quite famous in the international stage. And now you're here. So it's a pleasure in that personal sense. And also it's a pleasure to have two very good actors who have been active in the English theatre field, one in Sri Lanka, one abroad. And I'm going to ask you first. Let me clarify this first. The reason I'm talking to you today is I saw both of you, strangely, in the artist protest march together, right? I was surprised to see Thusitha there because she isn't based in Sri Lanka. And both of you have been extremely active in the current protests in Sri Lanka. I've seen you at golfes, I've seen you with placards, and it interested me very much because apart from drama being integral to any kind of protest, right? It interested me to see you both because in a way, both of you are outsiders and in a way, both of you are insiders. Let me explain that. Thusitha is an outsider in a physical sense because your activity, your acting, your adult life happened abroad. And Tracy, though she studied abroad, came back and was very much part of the Sri Lankan scene. So in that sense, inside, outside. But on ethnic lines, and I want to get into ethnic lines, Tracy is from the Burgher community and Thusitha is from the Sinhala community. And Sri Lanka post-independence had pretty much made sure that some ethnic groups were meant to not be among the core ethnic grouping, the majority group. And I want to ask Tracy whether I'm wrong in assuming that people might have been made to feel outsiders to the national question, so to say. That is for you to answer, Tracy. I'm just guessing, but let's get there later. So I just wanted to bring in the framework in which I will be questioning you. Before anything, can I ask you to introduce yourself, right? Yourselves. Because Thusitha, I know you're one of the Sri Lankan actresses who have gone to perhaps the highest places anyone can go. Recently, we had Hiran, and he became very well known, but you probably were much before in places he's going now, right? And you both studied at the same place. So Thusitha, can you please give me a brief introduction of who you are? We'll start there, and then I'll ask the same questions from Tracy.
So, hello everybody. My name is Thusitha Jayasundara. I was born here. I grew up here, and I left to study at RADA, Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, in 1990. So I was a teenager waiting to sit my A-levels in 89, 90. So I then got an opening at RADA. I went and auditioned and I got a place there. And because of the instability that we all faced in Sri Lanka and because of lots of other reasons as well, really, I decided that it was something to pursue as an actor.
One of the reasons I'll actually follow up on 88, 89 was a time where the second JVP insurrection was raging here and it became very bloody. And as part of the English theatre group, Thusitha, I think there was a personal tragedy that all of you went through as well, which is the death or the murder of Richard. That it's okay if you refer to that as being one of the reasons that you really couldn't handle being here.
Yes. Richard de Souza had come to mean an awful lot to myself. as somebody who was engaged in English theatre at the time, he was a very charismatic and encouraging, warm force in my life. He was a sort of a mentor to me, because he saw me performing at the various Shakespeare festivals, drama festivals that we used to join as schools. So that was my personal link with him. Also, my brother was extremely close friends with him, and they were very political animals, both of them. And Richard befriended not just my brother, but a group of young men who were extremely bright, and they were the Sinhala theatre, basically. They were a group of guys that were interested in the Sinhala theatre. My brother was one of them, although he wasn't one of the actors per se. He used to act from time to time, but he was not one of the core of the acting group, but he was very much a core of those group of boys. And Richard became very close to them. I think the connection was forged through the British Council initially, and then it became an independent sort of friendship, a huge collaboration that took place. But then, unfortunately, some very key members of that acting group, two in particular, were abducted and disappeared. So this was the precursor to Richard's own demise. And they were very, very close. My brother had a long-standing friendship with both of them, and Richard had come to love them too. And when they disappeared, it became evident that the government was probably going to come after more. And so this was the time when Richard was very strongly feeling like he was being followed to and from the art center and all of that. And it was also the time when he had got this amazing plum job at the IPS in Lisbon. So he was sort of being asked to come away and start a new life in Lisbon. Anyway, to cut a long story short, when Richard was abducted, it became very clear that my brother had to go too. He had to leave as quickly as possible. So he was in exile. He fled the country and stayed out for a long, long time. So that time was a period of enormous loss and pain, and generationally, it's hard to quantify for the community and personally for us. My mum and my dad were devastated. They had to sort of forge this level of terror, which as kind of comfortably off families, we didn't have to counter this level of savagery, really. We insulated.
Well, the reason for the abductions, the two young men and Richard, was it the drama activity that made them be a threat, you think? Was it because we're talking about resistance and drama, and like in my interview a few days ago with Kanchuka, she said in places like India, they are actually massacred even when the public is watching by the authorities sometimes. So Sri Lanka too had a similar incident in this case. Was it for their dramatic activity, you think, that they were a threat to the government then?
No, I think it was largely because the government was enjoying a period of impunity then as well. And so the thing that Richard and Hiran were most fiercely engaged with was trying to get out the human rights violations that were taking place in very, very remote parts of the country. more southerly parts of the country. Hiran knew these areas better than Richard because he was born, well, he grew up in the south, in Gaul, which is where my father comes from.
Hiran Jayasundara is your brother, Hiran Jayasundara.
Yeah. So, and Hiran was extremely bilingual. He had a very strong grasp of Sinhala, so and English. So he could translate these stories. So together they were trying to get out the accounts that the government was suppressing, to draw international media attention to it. And the IPS was useful in this regard. This international connection that Richard had forged, and was, he was highly respected. So it was about trying to draw attention and just maybe to stop aid from coming to the country, the aid that was helping the government perpetuate their terror. So they were leaking information, basically extremely highly secret information about what the government was getting up to and who it was making disappear. So it had gone beyond the sort of drama workshops by this point. It started there, and a lot of the people who were involved as the acting company were people who had direct experience of militia coming in the night, decimating villages, burning their families, etc., etc. So it soon escalated out of explorations of theatre into a situation not dissimilar to what we have now. Yeah.
Okay, so Thusitha, it hit you so hard, and I believe you left school even without A-levels, right? You chose to leave.
I did, yes. I by that point I felt like I was not really, I didn't really fit into that school. I didn't really find it a comforting place. I never did. I was kept in place by a group of friendships, really, that were extremely timely and extremely important to me. But when everybody started to leave, I just felt so desolate because I hadn't really made friends with the school. So I decided I was going to, get out. And I had no plan at that particular junctures because this whole sort of drama school thing hadn't happened. But I thought, I won't be able to think straight until I get out. And then when I get out, eventually, although it might be quite painful, something will sort of coalesce and some kind of shape will emerge. So I did that.
Right. Before I get into your career in the UK, Tracy, you're younger than Thusitha, right? By a few grades?
2 years.
2 years. How did you manage this particular time? Because your family would have made sure that you were within the context of English theatre. You would have seen this as well, right? This time, how were you impacted, Tracy?
1989, 88, 89. I mean, I was 14 and 15 at the time. And so not very aware. I mean, I was aware of the terror because we saw it everywhere. My family was scattered all over the island. So whether it was driving up to Nuwara or going to Puttalam or wherever my uncles happened to be, you just saw bodies burning on the road. I'll never forget. It's just imprinted in my memory. driving into Puttalam town, the main junction, you know, as we approached it, there was a fire in the middle of the junction. And we realized when we got close to it, it was burning bodies that had been, you know, arranged like a pile of logs, and just on fire. So I was very aware of it in that sense. And then, of course, from hearing my parents talking, you know, there was so many rumors going around. There were things like the JVP was going to force people over the age of 60 to retire or something like that. But it was coming across in a much stronger way than that. And I remember being terrified for my grandmother and my grandaunt, who were both over 60 and who had raised me. And so that put a lot of fear into me. But I think also, you know, we were off school for, I don't know, 6-9 months, something like that. And
by that time I was out of school, so I never actually went through that. Tracy, did Richard's death affect you in any way? Or were you too small?
Yes, it did, in the sense that everybody knew, especially sort of in a, let's say in the middle classes or whatever, everyone knew who Richard was and what he did. And he was a beacon in that sense for us. So when he was murdered, yeah, it had a big impact in that sense, that it was the first time in my experience that someone from my world was caught up in this and became a victim of it. But also at that age, I wasn't really into theater. I didn't really do any. I think I was over the age of 15 when I finally sort of started performing in plays and things. So, I mean, I would say at the time I was pretty ignorant, and I sort of understood these things. As to what impact it had on me personally, I would say a little. You know, when you're 14 and 15, you're just sort of, I don't know, well, I certainly was mostly, you know, away with the fairies or, you know, with my head in the clouds.
Correct.
So,
Tracy, though your degree is also from the UK, if I'm correct.
yeah.
How did that happen? What was that decision that made you, and you pursued drama? So that's not a normal subject that a normal person would use. How did that happen?
Well, I think in my family, it is very normal and it is very usual from my background. I think for a lot of kids to go and study drama would have been a fight with the parents. But in my case, it was more like, what do you mean you don't want to do drama? Of course you're going to do it. Go and do it.
Wendy Watchmore being maybe the main person who brought the whole concept of elocution and, you know, drama studies to Sri Lanka. And that's your grandmother. So, and then your mother followed her footsteps quite strongly and is a very powerful presence in Sri Lanka even now. And so, yes, naturally, Tracy, that would have been the normal thing, normal path you would have been expected to tread on.
Yeah. So I did. I mean, when I was younger, I sort of did my very best not to do any of it, much to the despair of my grandmother. But yeah, then when I was about 15, I was kind of thrown into it and haven't looked back.
Where did you go, Tracy? Which give us a brief account of your education.
So I went to Goldsmiths College, which is part of the University of London, and then I did a double honors degree in drama and theatre.
You decided to come back, right? After being trained there, why?
I came back due to personal reasons. really, there was a sort of very traumatic event that took place within my immediate family. And I came back to support my family. But also, when I did come back, I'd already graduated and I'd been out of college for a couple of years. And I always, there was always the intention to come back to Sri Lanka and to start a theatre company. That was sort of my main aim. So I came back. I don't think I ever meant to stay. You know, I was always like, I'm going to come back for a bit and then I'm going to go. But I never left.
Why?
Guys, can I just interrupt for 1 second? I just need to pop out and check on my mum. I'm going to come back. Okay?
Yes, yes. Switch off your camera or whatever and go. Tracy,
Mm-hmm.
why would you not think of going out? The reason the strange question is coming up is one heartbreaking thing that I'm seeing here is that when people are talented and skillful enough to actually find a job abroad, many leave, many do, because you're skilled enough, you've got a degree from London, you're probably going to not find it difficult to get a job. And people like that normally tend to get out of this place. The normal excuses given are we are doing it for our kids. Now, I know you have kids, right? The second thing is, I can't do anything with my talent here. These are the common excuses. I'm trying not to be judgmental, but that's what normally happens. Why didn't you leave?
I love my country. I do. I think, again, it goes back to being raised by my grandmother. And she instilled in us a love for the country. And she was very clear that we were to continue her legacy as a service to the nation. So that's one reason. You know, it's my home. I Once I came back, I sort of threw myself into theater and I also on radio. And I decided to use my skill to just share what I had learned, for one thing, in terms of theater, to share the kinds of theater I had learned about, and to really work with local writers. And I, I decided once I started the company that that's what I was going to do. Um, in addition to sort of doing the radio work, that theater would be the way in which I talked to my most immediate community about issues in the country. And I think maybe one of the differences, or one thing that really motivated me to stay, is that when I left at the age of 19, I was still just, I would say, clueless, quite clueless. I had a little bit of understanding, but not a lot. But once I went to college and lived there, and I was fully politicized. Goldsmiths was a leftist, very progressive college. Um, and our student union, for instance, was run by labor youth. Um, and so I went on marches, I went for rallies, I went for protests, you know, protesting against the, gosh, it seems weird now, but you know, Aung San Suu Kyi. When she was first under house arrest, I went for protests, and then, you know, so I came back very politicized. And it was very easy for me to jump in. And once I jumped in, I did realize this thing of, yeah, you know, people are leaving. There is a massive brain drain. There always has been. And I decided not to do that. It would have been easy for me to go back to London, but I'm also, I think, just really stubborn and a bit bullheaded, really. And so I was like, no, I'm not. I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do this thing.
Probably bullheaded is correct, Tracy, for all of us here. Okay. Thusitha, your journey, like you went to RADA, and can I just ask by asking if that was as leftist and radical as Tracy said Goldsmith was? Was it having a lot of, leftism and socialism in it, or is it a very different place? You're muted, Thusitha.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No, it's a very different place. It's not politicized in quite the same way. And also because of Thatcher's kind of presence in the kind of political spectrum, when I was there, it was still in danger of being quite elite. So the student body was made up largely of quite affluent people. And then there were these very, very hard-won places, scholarship places. To his enormous credit, the principal that was functioning at the time that I joined was really fighting against this situation. But the kind of fee-paying aspect of it meant that it was politically perhaps a little bit muted. It was nowhere near politicized as Goldsmith. Never will be, really. It's much more, never will be. It's much more establishment, much more establishment. And so the politics tend to be perhaps aptly quite performative rather than rooted in something fundamental, So
my next question to Sita is what Tracy said, that she always knew she was going to come back. Am I right in guessing that the reason that made you leave Sri Lanka was too traumatic for you even to think that there was a choice of coming back?
It's quite a big question for me, Madhubhashini, because I sort of feel that I wasn't fitting into society here. I felt it was very, very hard to be a girl. It just was. It is. And somebody who's slightly different in their thoughts about what it means to be a woman and all this stuff. It isn't a place that welcomes that kind of difference, I don't think at all.
Is UK any better though, Thusitha?
Sorry, what's that?
Is England any better though?
I'm sure. But my experience of it was growing up as a teenager, getting into adolescence and before, in the school that I went to, it didn't make me feel particularly adjusted, shall we say, to the country or the school or anything else. So, and then on top of that, I choose to study something that doesn't really have any kind of stable livelihood attached to it. Not that it has a stable livelihood attached to it anywhere in the world, far from it, but you kind of can't be assured of any kind of income or any kind of anything. So you can sort of sit and either theorize about it, or you could set up a school, or you could teach, or, and the one thing that, if you're going to train as an actor, the one thing that you need to keep doing is to keep practicing it. That's how you get better. And so those sorts of conditions didn't really present themselves to me as somebody who had graduated from the drama school in this
So what was your trajectory, Thusitha? Once you got your degree, what happened?
So at the time that I graduated, it was very thin on the ground for non-white actors, very thin.
Which year was this, Thusitha? Which year are we talking about?
93. So quite, I mean, not recent, but actually not that, not that historical either. So it was we were a tiny minority. And so the trajectory, in a way, I was sort of saved from quite a few years of complete unemployment, which faced a lot of us, I got a contract with the RSC for a long period of time, 3 years.
Royal Shakespeare Company. Let me do a wild guess. It can't be easy getting into that, right?
No, but when you've been to a school like RADA, they take you a bit more seriously than if you'd gone to some other school, or if you were a university, you'd exited with a drama degree from a university, you would probably find it almost impossible at that juncture as a non-white person to get into.
How many non-white people were there, Thusitha, honestly? You must surely have been the first Sri Lankan, right?
Yeah. I can't remember. There was probably about, if I think about, there was no other Asian person there. There were 2 British Afro-Caribbean people. It was pretty thin on the ground.
I'm trying to cut through your modesty here. So when you say there were no other Asians at that moment, had there been other Asians before? And by Asian, you're saying South Asian, East Asian, everything?
So Southeast Asians, very few. I think who was the woman? Oh my God, I can't believe that. Madha Jaffrey.
Yeah.
Who was probably one of the first Asian people to go to RADA, actually, was Madha Jaffrey. A lovely actress, but she just made an absolute fortune making, writing cookery books and making cookery programs in New York. It just seemed to flower so magnificently in that area that I think she decided, to follow that. Because I think she struggled to find work. She found it, she just wouldn't be employed for vast tracts of time. So, and she was a very bright woman. Anyway, so she was one of the first. I don't know whether she made it to the RSC. I don't know. But it was a real novelty. And there wasn't, in the 3 years that I spent there wasn't a single other Asian person there.
Yeah, so that kind of makes us calculate. I'm sorry, the power that you must have had as an actor, Thusitha. I'm not trying to flatter you. I'm just looking at the statistics. Also, what are the characters that you played during the 3 years you were there at Royal Shakespeare Company?
Phenomenal.
I know. You can't get Thusitha to say anything. So I'm at least trying to put the facts, statistics out.
No, I think I'd like to set this straight. I don't think I'm modest. I think it's very, very important to be quite accurate about these things, I think. I don't think, I mean, if I just you wait till I finish my little film. I won't stop talking about it. I will bombard you from every direction. And keep
it's just that this is why I'm sticking to statistics. And I asked you who were the other South Asians. You had to think, and then are you the first Sri Lankans? You said yes. So it doesn't matter. We shall form our own opinion. Question: what were the characters you played in the Shakespeare Drama Company while you were there?
I played. So just to be quite clear about this too, so we were employed on a players cast contract, which is essentially what the RSC does is it harvests the latest drama graduates, and you go through an apprentice program where you are the spear carrier basically for 3 years. Mm-hmm. But if some illustrious director takes a shine on you and decides to put you in something, you can then be given a few lines, or you might even be given some part that is a part, something to do. Anyway, so that's the contract which I came in on. And so as such, I was mainly playing ensemble parts, but I happened to land a really beautiful production, which was one that Tracy is very keen on, which is Peer Gynt, which was directed by a man called John Barton, who happened to be the sort of one of the most illustrious Shakespeareans around. And I got on really well with him, and we worked a lot together after that. And that was my sort of lifeline in my early years. And then I played, a young sort of made up parts in Coriolanus. So I was one of the starving peasantry in Coriolanus. And found a great deal of self-expression through that wordless part, I have to say. Probably the most expressive I was, and got really shouted at for it, and for overacting. And then I also had a part which was, now let me get this straight. It was a play called Pentecost.
Oh, yes.
By a man called David Edgar.
Mm-hmm. What a play.
And it was about a group of asylum seekers taking 3 art historians hostage in a chapel. And I was playing a Tamil refugee. So there was the, and then I had to sort of come to grips with the fact that actually I wasn't Tamil, and I didn't speak a word of Tamil. And I said this to them, and they said, "Oh, well, what language can you speak?" And I said, "I can speak Sinhalese." And then they sort of, with a blink of an eye, "Could you be a Sinhalese refugee?" And I said, "Yeah, I could be. The trajectory of that person might be a little bit different to what you've written, but I could be." So it was a very, very strange experience, that. But anyway, as a young actor who has to tackle pretty much whatever's put in front of them and be as biddable as you possibly can, because actors are meant to be biddable.
Can I interrupt for a minute, though?
Yes.
Because I actually saw Pentecost. And for me, I think I was in my second year of university by then. And hearing that monologue, she had a big monologue in Sinhala. And being a Sri Lankan surrounded by, as she said, I mean, even at Goldsmiths, it was quite similar. Nimi Haraskama was in the year ahead of me at Goldsmiths, but apart from that, no Sri Lankans. So hearing Sinhala being spoken by a performer of the RSC, it was a real moment. You feel a little seen. It had a real impact on me. I was just utterly thrilled. I just wanted to say that. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. I think you must be the only Sri Lankan who actually saw a live performance of that. So I'm
well, I don't know if I was the only Sri Lankan. I'm sure others went. But yeah, I saw that. And my younger sister happened to be there at the time as well, and she saw it too. And I just remember so clearly, we both looked at each other with such sort of like joy because she started off this story with Ekumat Tekarataka. Was it a story about a big bear or something? I can't remember, but the
No, it was
moment,
the it was the story of Rama and Sita.
yeah,
I think the big bear was probably Ravana, wasn't it?
because I remember you went Vishal or something, and you made this big move like that. And Tammy and I were just in transports of delight, like, oh my God, someone's speaking Sinhala in this Western show, kind of thing. It was amazing.
Okay, thank you, Tracy. This is then after RSC.
Sorry,
after RSC, did you? It was a 3-year contract, was it?
it was a 3-year contract. I did more theatre in London. I did
at any point did you miss the fact that you were not in Sri Lanka? Because I know you are very politically aware of what's going on here, even now,
Yeah.
while you're still protesting at Galle Face. At any point, did you ever think there was a door open for you to come back?
No, not at that time. I just didn't know, because of the personality I am and because of what I experienced as a kind of as I said, a slightly misaligned adolescent. I really couldn't figure it out. I don't know. I didn't know what I would do, how I would, work. So no, I didn't. I just basically was a jobbing actor that went from job to job, whatever I could find. And I had my lucky breaks with theatre. I had some lovely theatre jobs.
Could you describe a few, please, Thusitha? Because I think many Sri Lankans are not quite aware of what you do and what you have done. So now that I have a chance of actually speaking with you, could you just give us a small breakdown of what you did in your career?
So while this director, John Barton, was alive, while he was still working in the theatre, he gave me my first big break, which was a break. It was which is, I played Cain's wife, Cain and Abel. What he did was he adapted a poem by Byron, which is called Cain. And it's a poem which has 3 voices in it. There's Cain, Cain, his wife, Ada, and Lucifer. So these three people have this incredibly long conversation, which is very, very about the existence of man and his relationship to God. And it was a beautiful part, and it was the big part that any young actor longs for. But unfortunately, it wasn't very fashionable at the time when it came out. It was sort of very, and that was something that was very particular to John, was that he never followed fashion in any way. And so the project itself slightly went underground. It was literally underground in the theatre that it was playing in, which was the smallest theatre at the Barbican, which was just by the kind of, it was a subterranean place that very few people knew about. So it was this epic piece that was staged as a chamber piece, and it lived underground. So it sort of slightly went underground, but it was a beautiful experience. And then I went on, so he would then, we had struck up a really good rapport by this point, and he would ask me to come and be his guinea pig on these various outings of Shakespeare's texts, right? So basically, he loved the fact that I didn't seem too bothered by being unprepared at that juncture in my life, I hasten to add. that I didn't seem to be too thrown by the fact that I was sight reading something, never had given it a second thought, and I didn't have a particular attachment to success or failure or any of those kind of anxiety-based things at that time. So I was quite a guinea pig for him. So I went and did all these workshops with him, and would be surrounded by all these sort of titans of British theatre. There's, you know, all these amazing sort of from the previous generations, you know, because he was the guy that kind of nannied Judi Dench and Ian McKellen and all of these guys, you know, Donald Sinden, Peggy, what's she called? Peggy
Ashcroft?
Peggy Ashcroft, Harriet Walter, all these very, very sort of extraordinary theatre actors. So he was the man who stood by them and brought them up and sort of challenged them. So I went on these various workshops with him. I went to New York to the Public Theatre, and then you had all the beautiful American stars that turned up in deference to him, you know, because he was their guru. He was even bigger in America than he was in England. It was quite a force to reckon with at that juncture. So I was being very lucky in that respect, being very, very sort of closeted. And then I came back to England, and I went straight into the Young Vic. I went into another job with the RSC, which put me in touch with a director called Tim Supple, who I know has had relations, has employed and worked with another Sri Lankan actor, Prasanna, who Tracy was talking to me about. Anyway, Tim and I worked together for a long time. Again, that was a long alliance where I did Twelfth Night, where I played viola. Then I played a young American girl, which I relished, you know, because...
Just to say that when you say I joined the Royal Shakespeare Company and played viola, I hope you understand that you are now getting the main role in the Royal Shakespeare Company, and that it's a long way from the side part that you played when you first joined it.
Yeah. I mean, by that point, I didn't get viola for the Royal Shakespeare Company. I got it for the Young Vic, but nevertheless, absolutely acknowledging that it's a progress. Yeah. It's a big
and at that time, was England looking at colored actors to give such roles to? I mean, the main role, in fact.
No way. And that was something that one has to really give credit to Tim Supple for, because he came from his main sort of the person he looked up to was Peter Brook, who Hiran has worked with, and Peter Brook really opened up the world of sort of casting non-white actors in significant parts. And as a sort of an acolyte of Peter Brook, Tim really took this to heart, and it really meant something to him that went far beyond the sort of political correctness that it can sometimes occupy, you know, in later years, not at this juncture. We hadn't got there yet, but so he cast me in a production of Comedy of Errors. And this was, but he offered me the part of the courtesan in Comedy of Errors. I don't know whether you're familiar with it. And I sort of had the balls, and I'm so glad I did. And I said, nah, don't want to do it. Because I just thought, And I just, no, not that interested. And sort of, for the first time, put my foot down and said, no. And then he sort of said, oh. And he was sort of slightly knocked back. And I said, I'm not interested in that part. Thank you very much. And then he said, okay, now throws me into a really interesting quandary, because the only other female part in it that is vacant at the moment is the part of Luciana. And the part of Adriana, I've already offered to an actress that I think would play that part really well. So now that puts me, because I want you in this company. So would you take on Luciana? And then what happened was, so these blood sisters, one was being played by a European and the other one was being played by an Asian. And so that started a really interesting conversation in Tim's mind about the fact that theatre is not interested, or indeed should be used to present any kind of literal reality. That's not really the function of theatre. Television and film occupy that space, but theatre has to occupy quite forcefully, has to occupy a different space. It has to occupy the space of conjecture. And so in a strange sort of way, this kind of act of bloody-mindedness, a bit of Miss Piggy, perhaps, I don't know, something for which I am very grateful. It forced a kind of a change in a person. It forced, I didn't mean to do it. I mean, it wasn't an act of kind of, I just said, I don't want to be playing a courtesan, but it had this knock-on effect. And so suddenly people were going, oh, so you're sisters, and we're having to seriously entertain that you're sisters. And the production also was so mesmeric and beautiful, and was about really, really tapping into surface impressions. I mean, it's a very, very, it was a very depthful production. A lot of people do comedy of errors as slapstick, which of course is quite a readily available rendition of it. But our production was all about the fact that you think something is something and you dig a bit deeper and it turns out to be something else. It's about a kind of a illusion, sort of unpicking sort of this a collective sort of sleep and illusion that we sort of suffer from. It was an amazing production. Anyway, so that got the ball rolling, and then the next thing
done before, though. Had that been done before?
As Viola in Thusitha.
Yeah, Thusitha, my question before.
Sorry, guys.
Had that been done before? That two ethnically different people played sisters in a public production in the UK? Was that the first time?
I expect it really was the first time. Absolutely the first time. And it hasn't really been done since. So I have to say that there was a sort of a forward movement with that tiny thing, or tiny mammoth thing that Tim did. And then there was a backslide. I can remember one of the jumping forward, one of the things that I was in, which turned into a massive phenomena, was like Warhorse. Warhorse started off as a complete unknown quantity, an adaptation from a book, quite a problematic adaptation of a book, with lots of puppets and multimedia and actors. And I was playing the central character's mother. And the central character and I, the family, we were a nuclear family, mother, father, son, were from North Devon during the First World War. And my husband was white, as was my son. And there I was. And that was another sort of a leap that the National took. And this was at the National Theatre. And I can remember there was a lot of unease and a lot of expressed unease about that an Indian woman was playing the mother of a white child during the time of the First World War, and she was meant to be from Devonshire. And I have to say, I was standing next to a wooden and wicker puppet who was meant to be our horse, So what the immediate thing that sprung to my mind was, okay, so you guys in the audience that have a problem with this are completely willing to put all your belief
I think you're stuck, Thusitha, but all the belief in a wooden horse, but not the person playing a character. This is, you might have to rejoin. Yes. You stopped at the place where you were telling the audience is now willing to believe that a wooden thing is a horse, right? Mike, Thusitha. This is the mic.
Sorry?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
So that was the thing, that you're completely willing to go with the horse that's got 3 puppeteers visible in it, manipulating it, and that is made out of wood, and a lot of people were moved to tears by this horse, and rightly so. The horse was incredible. The horse was amazing, but there was no suspension of disbelief required to go with the horse, but the suspension of disbelief that was required to believe in me playing that character was almost insurmountable. And this was.
Did you express this in public, Thusitha, ever within that context?
I didn't. I think it was because I was so confused by it. Because the thing is that as a very, as an actor, you are essentially extremely insecure about what you put out there. You have to sort of believe it's of some value. And so the first place that I think any actor would go to is, I'm just not doing this well enough. I'm just not somehow not pulling this off.
And the director, no one spoke out either on the double standards there?
No, because no, they didn't. There wasn't any kind of public forum for it, but it was everywhere. I mean, it was in after opening nights with any of these glitzy productions, you have, real fanfares and party and all of that stuff, right? So all the acting company and everybody troops in, and all these people in lots of sparkly frocks wander around, and you have this whole evening of this stuff. And even in that context, there were so many people who were being openly vocal about this. Oh, this is political correctness gone mad. The more champagne they drank, the more this kind of chat seemed to flow, from all of the liberati, all of the people that you were, So this when was this? This was about 2009. Yeah, so I mean.
And you must have been, you were there, right? You were listening to all this.
Yeah. I mean, I was a bit late to the party because I was somewhere else talking to some friends. But there was a big fight that had broken out, and one of my fellow actors, who I, very, very touched by this, but he left his extremely fancy agent because she was one of these people that said, "Oh, this is political correctness," and he's a white actor. This is political correctness gone mad. She was standing with a, and that's where it sort of finally came to. Even there's I mean, we were expecting this kind of review from the Daily Mail, but that's what the Daily Mail had to say. Oh, everybody's, how are we supposed to believe in Black and Asian people in this sort of Devonshire village? No matter that there's this bloody great wooden horse standing there. And it's told like a fairy tale.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, Thusitha, within my framework of insider outsider, whether you ever were occupying the insider place anywhere, except maybe on stage as an actor, hearing what you're saying now.
Sorry, Madhubhashi, you got cut off. Was that a question or an observation? I couldn't
quite work out. It's an observation, but you can react to it. I was thinking, given what you're saying, I'm wondering whether you were ever within an insider location, because even there, no matter how good you are as an actor, the judgment was on different things, right?
Yeah, I mean, you very kindly pointed out to me, and I'm very grateful to you, the role that Tim Supple possibly played in trying to draw me into the inside position. But it seems like I've sprung out again. Do you know what I mean? I think quite possibly existentially, I need to just keep springing out into the outsider position, because that's, for whatever reason, that is the place, that is the space I occupy. That certainly, that is my experience, is being an outsider in my home, my birth home, and being an outsider there, which is expected, and being brought into these august institutions from time to time, but experiencing that outsider position pretty continuously, I think. Yeah.
I'm going to Thusitha, thank you. I'm going to get to Tracy. Tracy is something that strikes me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm coming from a space of looking at you as an outsider in this sense. When I grew up, I mean, you were my juniors. When we talked about ethnicity in Sri Lanka, there were always 4 little figures drawn. In our National Day, we used to have one person with a frock and a hat, and then one person with a candian, one person with the shawl, and one person with the dhoti and the whatever. And as I grew up, I mean, quite old now, this frock and the hat person just disappeared.
Yeah.
Right. And even we used to have this national anthem, but not played in all the channels before it just blew up. And there were 4 people, and then suddenly there were just 3. There was Sinhala, Muslim, and Tamil. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure there was another race here. They've just gone out of, they've been erased out of visual sense, even on cartoons. And I'm talking about the burger community, right? And I don't think any of you have read my novel, but Peter's Place, where I grew up, is a burger community, and I saw them deplete and I saw them disappear. My neighbor, Thusitha, I know you're reading it slowly. My neighbor was a burger, right? And when he left, and some of the tables I still have was what he gave us. Some he gave freely, right? And they just went away. And if you read my novel further apart, Thusitha, that house was bought by an army commander, So what I saw happening in my little lane was a microcosm of what happened in Sri Lanka in a way, right? No, that's my personal plug. Sorry, I'm not like you. This is I self-promote. But what I wanted to tell you was, Tracy, you're part of that group that is quietly disappearing and getting, you're very much there, you're very much active. And I listened to what you said in the Gotagama College. What does it feel to at least, I mean, do you see the erasure happening on the national scene of a community that was very much a part of Sri Lanka? Now to my question, why didn't you go back? Your answer was simple, I love my country, right? And you said your grandmother, not only did she love it, she made such a difference. And your Wendy Watmore Academy is still making a difference. I know because I go there because of my kids. So your answer was not even like it's such a natural thing for you to say. Am I wrong in assuming that y'all are being erased and we are not giving enough credit to this ethnic group that are the burghers at present?
I think, no, I mean, I don't see it as as an erasure. I don't see it as a sort of willful, a thing that is being done willfully. I think the burger community has gotten just much smaller compared to what it used to be maybe when we were younger. And I feel we've gone the way of, small communities like the Boras, the Sindhis, there are those minority communities also. So I think I don't know if it's an erasure, but I do know that less people know what a burger is. Yeah.
I guess it's
What started the migration, Tracy? The migration in earnest to places like, well, I sort of knew of people migrating to Australia. That seemed to be a sort of a,
Yeah.
I think Thusitha, the 1956 Language Act really made people feel you're not part of the nation that's going to be born soon.
Well, also because a lot of burghers at that time were in places of high administration, in the courts, in the law system. They were public servants also. And so with this language change, overnight laws changed, and overnight people, who are used to functioning in English and an administration that functioned in English, all that changed overnight, and it made a lot of people unemployed or unable to carry out their jobs, and so they all left. I mean, my entire family is either in Australia or in England. And I know a lot of families like that left. But I would say that was the main reason.
Tracy, your political awareness, you're directing it directly into your plays, right? Can we please talk about Mind Adventures a little here?
Sure. Do you want me to just tell you how it started? Or?
How it started, yes.
Okay.
I'm trying to talk little here so that you guys can talk a lot.
So we started in 1999. It was started by 3 women, myself and Michelle Pereira, who was pretty well known in English theatre at that time. And she was also a very highly regarded, she was head of a news team. So Michelle Pereira, and then Karen Baltazar, another burger girl, who had also studied theatre in Australia and came back. And we met on a production called Widows by Ariel Dorfman. And I think we just hit it off really well. And then
Who did that, Tracy?
that
Widow?
was Widows was by Stage Light and Magic, Feroz Kamardin. So he was a childhood friend, and when I sort of moved back to Sri Lanka, he rocked up and said, "We're doing a play," and we did it, and I ended up directing it with him, as well as being in the cast.
Which
And
was this year? Which year was?
1998.
Okay, so the choice of widows, was it connected to what had happened in the 80s? What was the reason that, because English theatre has, I think,
Widows
two
is
strands.
about,
Yeah, it has
sorry?
two strands. It is a very entertaining strand and a very serious theatre as well. I'm talking about English theatre in general,
Yeah.
right? And did Feroz talk about why he chose that at that particular time?
Yeah, he did want to make a statement about disappearances, and because Widows is all about a village full of women whose men have all disappeared, and how the army intimidates them and tortures them, and all the kind of intricacies between civilians and army. Um, and yeah, he wanted to make a very strong political statement.
And were the conditions different from what Thusitha was talking about in the 80s? Because was it safe because it was clearly somebody else, some other country's person who had written it? And my bigger question here is, Thusitha, this is something I had seen. Hadn't theatre always used allegory symbolism and getting plays from other countries to talk about the present as a safety device? Because I remember during the 88, 89 time, Thusitha, I happened to be in the Kemadas Orchestra, right? Height of the JVP problems. And they did Dhavalabhishana, Men Without Shadows, Tracy. And the reaction of the cast to the torture that happened on stage, I mean, you could hear people crying out, even crying, because you could see torture and you knew it was happening outside the theater space in real life. And the costumes were very similar to the Sri Lankan, but it was set in France or whatever country. So was that a device that was very cleverly used to avoid censorship and intimidation, you think? Tracy, I would, what is your opinion?
Well, I think in the first place, it was purely a lack of local playwrights writing about this stuff. So, I mean, still to this day, in English theatre, there aren't a lot of plays published in English by English playwrights. There's very few. So, yeah, we couldn't talk directly about something that was happening in our country because no one was writing it. And the other thing is, Ariel Dorfman in particular, because we did, Feroz and I did Widows together, and then 2 years later, we also did Death and the Maiden, which is again about, torture and past crimes, and what is reconciliation, what about reparations, all these kind of things. So we had a lot of interest in that, and we had Sinhala Media covering us as well. And it was, I think in both instances, for Widows, we did get a death threat, but we went ahead with the show anyway.
And from who? You don't know, obviously. Yeah. On the phone?
Yeah. Someone called Feroz. So, but we went ahead. And with Death and Maiden, also, I mean, there was a lot of interest in it because it was like, oh my gosh, you're doing this play about torture and all that stuff. But I didn't feel particularly unsafe doing it. It felt right to do it. And for both those shows, I remember we had extremely appreciative audiences. And people coming backstage and talking to us and crying and saying, thank you for doing this. And, we are feeling seen. This happened to my sister, my brother, something. We always had people like that coming backstage. So, who was president then? I think it was D.B. Wijetunga, was it? 98, 99. I think it was him. No, and that's a question I've been asked quite often. Like, did you feel unsafe or was there violence? But I have to say also the mere fact of it being English theatre and English theatre being considered such a niche thing for just this very small group of people that it tends to be almost ignored or overlooked. Wouldn't be the same for, like I say, with Dawla Bishana and things like that. It wouldn't be the same in Sinhala theatre.
I see a difference now, Tracy. I agree with you that the niche factor, simply because of the existence of people like you and Ruanti, who are now crossing borders so easily and working with the Sinhala theatre crowd as well. Like if you take Dear Children Sincerely.
And Tamil theatre.
Absolutely. And most of them are not from the English acting pool, are they?
No.
That's the thing. So I think now we are seeing a change in the fact that no more can, I mean, definitely there was a exclusivism associated with English theatre, but that is quietly fading, I have a feeling, at least with some of you, right?
I really wish it would fade a lot faster, because we still get sort of people saying, oh, English theatre, or, what are you doing? Why don't you collaborate? Why don't you do this? And, there is still that kind of feeling that is still there. Because I think we don't get enough coverage of the fact that there are these incredible collaborations going on. But of course, it's not a comedy.
Okay, did everyone get stuck? Trace, you're stuck. Thusitha, are you here? So I'll just keep talking till one of you comes back. One of the questions that I want to put to both of you when you do. You guys are back, no problem. We'll just keep going. Thusitha, so living in Sri Lanka, living in Colombo, I don't think it's ever going to dissolve that exclusiveness, not completely. And also maybe it's a physical fact of that we don't travel very much, no? Because of the conditions of the country. Was Dear Children Sincerely taken out of Colombo?
I think so. Yes, it has.
But not much, right?
It has been to Puttalam. Ruanti really is the one who should be.
Yes, hopefully I will get a chance to talk to her as well. So now let's get back to Mind Adventures. Tracy, now you were part of Widows and you were very much.
Okay, so then I met these two girls, Michelle and Karen. They were amazing. And then we did, after Widows, a local playwright called Senaka Aberatna approached me with his script called Virgo Intacta. Then I loved it and I asked Michelle and Karen to be in it. And after we finished that, we sort of thought, we get on really well. We have a lot of very similar ideas and intentions. And then we decided to make it official, become a girl band. No, to start this theatre company. And then we did, yeah. So it started.
And Mind Adventures is one of the few places that deal with original scripts, right? Yeah. I've heard you just maybe one time in real, as a real audience member. How does that work, Tracy? Do you all write your own stuff? Do you do other people's plays as well?
Yeah, I mean, we started off doing other people's work. So in terms of local writers, we performed Senaka Aberatna, Mike Masilamani. I did two of Senaka's plays actually, Virgo Intacta and 3 Star K.
Yeah. Do you know he marched with us on that day in the parade?
Yes, I saw him.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was working with the two of them, Senaka and Mike Masilamani. And then in 2009, I decided to experiment with this thing called devised theater that I'd been hearing about and reading about, and very sort of, I don't know, confidently, because, I just sort of threw myself and my company into a process that I knew nothing about, nothing. And we faffed around for about 3 months, and we came up with about 3 different stories, none of which I could move to fruition, mostly because I had no idea of what I was doing. And I was trying all these exercises and things, and then I sort of started panicking because we'd told everybody that we were doing a play, and now everyone was expecting a play, and there was no play. There was no play at all.
That's very productive, Tracy. That panic is sometimes the only thing that gets us to work anyway.
Yeah.
Me anyway.
So at that time when I was in this full mass panic and trying to keep these actors going, and they were like, it's been 3 months, we've created 3 shows and you've thrown them all away. And Mike happened to send me his short story called The Boy Who Speaks in Numbers. And I read it, and it was just, it made me cry. But also it was written with such tenderness and with such love, and talking animals, and very allegorical.
Who is Mike Tracy?
Mike Masilamani.
Yes, I'm afraid I haven't read that, but that's a Sri Lankan writer.
Yeah, Mike Masilamani is a Tamil author and poet. And
who writes in English?
Yes. Okay. So I've toured his work before in 2000, and from 2006 to 2009. I sort of kept staging a piece of his called "Looking Through My Earphones," which is a performance poetry. When it first started out in 2006, it was only 20 minutes long, but by the time 2009 came around and we did it at the Galle Literary Festival, it was closer to 45 minutes.
Sri Lankan writer living in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, Sri Lankan writer
not...
living in Sri Lanka. No, he hasn't lived here now for about 6 or 7 years. He moved to Australia.
Okay.
So I had been doing his work intermittently anyway, and just sort of developing this show. So then he sent me this short story, and I was like, right, well, this is what we're doing, because it was about the war. It was about internally displaced people. It was about a young orphaned boy whose village is at the front lines of the war. And, things like, instead of playing with toy cars, the children played, identify that plane, and things like that. And so he has his talking animals in it also, because that's the boy's way, it's his coping mechanism. And so you follow this child and various members of his family as they leave their war-torn village and they move to an IDP camp, and what happens from there onwards. And that's what I was waiting for, just someone to write something about what was happening now and happening to us. And so then I just, my cast was so relieved, because I turned up one day going, look, we have a script. Which we didn't. It was a 24 chapter, like little short story. But then in about 6 weeks, we put something together and we put it on. And the timing was crazy because it was about IDPs, and it was about IDPs wanting to leave the camps. This is Manic Farm in particular. And we staged it in the final week of November 2009. And the day after our last show, which was the 1st of December 2009, Manic Farm was opened, and the people in Manic Farm were allowed to leave and were given a measure of freedom of movement. So it was very timely, and I think after that I just thought I'm going to keep trying to do this. And of course, then we just kept. Then it turned out that a young actor that I was very close to, he was actually studying device theatre at Goldsmiths. This is Arun Velandawe Prematilaka. So he went to Goldsmiths like 12, 13 years after I did. And he was actually studying device theatre there. So when he came back, sort of hooked him firmly and said, right, come on, let's what have you got and how can we use it? And so then things got better.
Tracy, just to interrupt, is Arun's Gresham Award-winning play also part of a devised theatre exercise?
No.
He wrote it completely.
He wrote it completely by himself.
Yeah. Very powerful, very intense writing. Yeah.
He's an incredible writer. He always has been. I mean, one of my favorite works of his is called Only Soldiers, which I don't think enough people have seen, but it's a stunning piece of writing. It's about, gosh, shall I tell you what it's about? It's digressing from what you want me to say, but it's based on a book that my husband.
Normally, Tracy, I just shut everyone up who tries to tell me a story because I want to read the original, but maybe it'll help. Yeah. Okay, if it clarifies your point, I shall excuse you here. In this house, it's criminal activity to tell anyone a plot, but go ahead. I shall forgive you. No. We have.
So,
yes.
Only Soldiers is based on a book called The Most Dangerous Moment. And it's based on what Winston Churchill said during the Second World War. Winston Churchill was asked what was the most dangerous moment. And he said it was when Japan tried to bomb Sri Lanka, tried to attack Sri Lanka. Because, and this is again all about the significance of where we are placed, the country is placed strategically. And he said, if the Allies had lost Sri Lanka, then Japan would have just come this way and pretty much smashed the Allies from that side of the world. And so he said the most dangerous moment was then. And he talked about, so basically, there was an RAF station in Sri Lanka that was manned by people. I mean, it was just considered a tiny outpost. But one day, when they were up in the air on a routine tour or reconnaissance, whatever, they spotted the ships and the aircraft. And the ship spotted their plane and started shooting them down. And just before they were shot down, the pilot was able to get a message to the Allied forces that the Japanese were coming. The book is called The Most Dangerous Moment. It's and I've just really given you a terrible sort of summary of it, but that was it. So
that's okay, but how does the book end? You can't stop there, Tracy.
I can't remember, to be honest.
Now, both of us are going to be looking for this book.
Well, I mean, you know how it ends, really. Historically, those air raids were stopped. They were thwarted.
Yeah, I just want to know how, because finally what Sri Lanka got was just one aeroplane coming down in a
Yeah.
paddy field.
Mm.
But how, like, did they get the message across in time?
Yes,
What
yes,
happened?
yes, they did. They got the message across in time, and the Allied forces sent reinforcements, which is why I think it only ended up with one plane in a paddy field.
Yes.
But so,
And Tracy, I'm just going to put this in. I think we are still as crucial as we were before, and that may be why the geopolitics are playing such a crucial part even now. Even with everything going on, which we should not forget. So
even now, the Allies are still looking after us, aren't they?
not too sure which way, but yes, not too sure what is meant. You know, the World War was easier. You could identify who was who. Right now, it's not clear at all. Let's not get there. Let's go back to the past here. So you were talking about Arun and device theater.
Yeah. So yeah, once Arun came along, it was much easier because he actually had working knowledge of it, and he'd worked with frantic assembly, so he had, really good work knowledge of it, and that gave us the ability to shape what we were doing a bit better. And so we kept doing it, and we kept, I think, getting better at it. And then from there, we went into trying our hands at immersive theater. Which
Immersive theater. What's the name? Immersive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Immersive theater. So that's where there is no boundary between the actors and the audience. Um, if I can take an example of our first immersive play, it was staged at the Rio Hotel, which was bombed out in 1983. And then we went in there in 2013, and it had not been used in any way at that time. So we just took the ground floor, which is the lobby and the pool area and the sort of sunbeds, and we took just the ground floor and we dug it up and we put in sort of lighting, and we had to do a lot of structural stuff, and it was very unsafe. I mean, even on our dress rehearsal night, a huge chunk of a pillar just fell crashing and just avoided killing our stage manager. So we were, literally.
Thusitha, I will ask later, what if these conditions existed in the UK, what would have happened? I'll ask you that later, okay? Yeah, stage managers can get killed by the falling
masonry.
Oh my God, no. We would have been sort of struck off as being, not
exactly, Tracy. Yes.
To any sort of, say, health and safety standards.
Yes.
So the play takes place all over that space. We had about 5 different plot lines, which all were interwoven. And the audience could decide where they wanted to go, who they wanted to follow. And then, so after about 50 minutes, we'd stop, we'd ring a bell, and we'd reset, and we'd play it again. And then the audience was encouraged to follow someone else. So you got a sense of the story, but you never saw what someone else was saying. Each audience member or a little group of people, everyone gets a different view of the story, comes into the story at a different point, can interact with the actors. We had sort of audience members coming and interacting with us, and I nearly thrashed someone because they came and tried to interact with me at the wrong moment, and I was in a very violent place at that time because it was quite violent and a very tense play. It was called Paria. And there was a lot of violence going on. And this poor audience member wanted really to get in there and came and sort of started getting in my face. And I nearly clobbered him because that's what my character was doing at the time. Um, so the so I guess though, like doing it like that, it makes sense for us as a company, and I think it helps us to really sort of bring what we are feeling about what's happening right now in our country to the fore. Um, yeah.
You also had a podcast, right, Tracy, where when the pandemic struck, you also, all artists got stuck.
Yeah.
Where would you perform? And then did you move on to a different media with the Mind Adventures Theatre Company?
No, no. And that was a conversation we had a lot at that time. I remember. So in 2020, we started this whole podcast series and we spoke to our network. So we spoke to theatre people in Africa, in Ireland, in America, in Asia, in all over the place. Um, and some people transitioned. Some people decided to go into like theatre online. But there was a lot of talk of what does theatre become then when you sort of do it in this medium. Do I want to do it? Do I not? Do we need to pivot? Do we need to think about new ways of making theatre? What is theatre? Um, so all these kind of questions came up, which was fascinating. I had a superb conversation with Soumya Lenage. It was just mind blowing. And like that, even hearing about what our friends are doing in Rwanda, because they had an online festival to commemorate their genocide, and it's been online for 2 years now. And how does that change from doing the thing there itself? But we as a company were not one of those companies who decided we can do um, streamed theater. I just
What is
didn't.
happening with the podcast though then? I know you have something there.
Podcast is there. It's on our. I mean, it stopped. I think we did it for a year, and then we stopped.
What were you doing in that, Tracy?
With the podcast.
In the podcast, yeah.
I just wanted to. We talked about what theater meant to us. Were we able to transition?
Okay.
But a lot of other, like the American interview with an actor there called Sanjit De Silva, that was very interesting because he talked about, it enabled us to talk about things we hadn't talked about before. Like one of the things he talked about that really interested me was the idea of an intimacy choreographer. Because over here we don't have that. We didn't even think about it, and whatever intimacy was done, I know I for one would be like, oh, just get over it and kiss him, whatever, or kiss her, just yeah. I had no time.
We don't have those conversations here at all, Tracy. Right?
No.
Zero. Right.
So that was an eye opener, like intimacy choreography, and then. We talked about theatre in time of plague, like Shakespeare, between 1603 and 1613 or something like that. Because of the plague, theatres were closed for like 7 years. So we talked about how do you survive in a time of crisis and of plague. And I'm trying to remember. Oh, then with Alice Malseed, who I interviewed in Ireland, she talked a lot about, and actually I kind of initiated it, the whole debate about the trans community. because J.K. Rowling had just come out with that time, at that time, saying trans women are not women.
Right. I did notice from the little I have seen of your, even your plays, you do talk about things which are not normally within the everyday conversations of Sri Lanka, I think. What was the play that I saw at Mangalam, Tracy?
Tea coffee.
Right. What could you just give us a, because that was so, I mean, that was enough for me to then follow all your other work. What was that play about?
That play is kind of about hypocrisies within the Sinhala and Tamil community when it comes to a variety of things, be it racism and it's about a very special set of, it's aimed very much at the upper classes, right? So it attacked all sorts of social pretenses through the idea of who drinks tea and who drinks coffee.
Very simply done, but very incisive, Tracy. That was very striking. All the two people did was sit and talk.
Yeah.
And then I was like sitting in the audience and saying like, okay, that's really clever. The amount of stuff you got in to an everyday conversation, which was very impressive. I'm going to go to Thusitha. And Thusitha, this is a personal question, okay? So I know you're politically very committed to what's happening here. And now you're here, you happen to be here, you're looking after your mother and all that. And I saw you at the protest. What does it feel to sit there to see all this and still care about the place you came from, right? And not being able, like to Tracy and I, for whatever worth, Tracy, definitely me, whatever, that's what we try to make a difference within here. Okay, and whatever happens, at least like when we die, we might have the idea that we tried. For me, definitely, all I can say is I tried to make a difference, right? Tracy, I'm sure, has done quite a lot. What does it feel, Thusitha, to be outside and then care deeply about what's happening and not being able to, like, in that sense, be insiders like Tracy and I are? It's a very personal thing. You don't really have to answer if you don't know the thing, but I'm just curious to know, because I know how much you feel about the politics here. And like with your brother and what you have seen in your childhood, what does it feel like to watch it from?
I think the thing that strikes me most forcibly is it's all I've known of Sri Lanka, really, in many ways. Not all I've known, obviously, but it is a very dominant part of what I've known. I was born in 71. I was an adolescent in the late 80s. And I'm 51 and I'm back here now. And, my mother had to bundle me off to have me. My mother was having me, and she was taken to the hospital during curfew. And in the middle of my life, my brother and Richard go through this incredible mangle, and I'm witness to it. And then now, in the sort of deep middle age of my life, I'm sort of back here, watching this unfold. And there's a really grim familiarity about it. And there's also things that are about it which are quite novel, but at the moment, like the sort of more comprehensive participation of citizens of this country. Because normally we know the people who are cannon fodder. We know the people who have to fight the hardest. And we know that when they disappear, nobody will know about them. But here there's novelty in that the upper classes have become involved, openly involved. And I hope and pray that it's a much more fundamental commitment to the struggle than having getting shot of power cuts and gas situations. I feel helpless. I feel overwhelmed. Just trying to do little things.
Like you are doing, I mean, listening to you, we might forget that you're doing very well in your career. Correct me if I'm wrong, you're in the Amazon production of Lord of the Rings, which were like all over the place. And it still hasn't come out, but you also transitioned to a movie, right? Or did you get into other mediums as well and not just drama?
Mainly television and some film, but not a lot of film. Yeah. And The Lord of the Rings is a television series that is going to be aired in September. Yeah. And
huge production, if I'm guessing correctly, right?
It is a huge
New Zealand, and
it is a huge, vast production. Yes. And but it's something that I know that on the outside of it, and this is not me being modest, this is the reality of it. It's on the outside of it, one imagines that it's kind of a massive break for people like me, and it is in a way, in terms of what an enormous reach this thing has. But as a jobbing actor, it is yet another gig, the trappings of the production are huge, indisputably so. But it's sort of not something that occupies it's not a high profile gig for me, who's been in the business now for 30 odd years. It's a job.
I think the difference is that is a transition to a popular entertainment culture, Thusitha, which...
Sure. But I have been doing like long running series before. So I've sort
like
of...
What? Like what, Thusitha? We didn't get to your screen presence at all.
All right. Well, I just basically, once I stopped doing theatre, and I stopped doing it largely because I wanted to earn a bit of money. And it's not really possible to earn that much money when you're on a staple of theatre work. And the way that people balance their accounts, if they find themselves in such a fortunate position, is that they do a bit of television to pay all the bills and send their kids to schools or whatever the expenses are, and then they do the theatre because they know that that's where much of the real work takes place. So I transitioned into television, and I did a long running television series called The Bill, which is a kind of a stalwart sort of cop series, which ran and was a very, very good training ground for young actors and actors generally, because there was a roll call of everybody that was acting basically passed through the corridors of the Bill, because it was something that ran for so long. And anyway,
what was your character there, Thusitha?
So there I played a Sri Lankan detective called Ramani, and Ramani de Costa she was called.
How come we don't even know about this or have seen it here? Was it ever aired in Sri Lanka?
I don't think so. It was massive in Australia. I mean, the Australians seem to really go crazy for the Bill. I would argue it was even bigger in Australia than it was in England.
Tracy, it's strange that we wouldn't have bothered to get that down here, given that we have a Sri Lankan playing a detective. Were you the main character in it, Thusitha? Oh.
I was a regular character in it. Okay. I was basically, there's no main character. It's an ensemble. It's an ensemble of cops, basically, of different types. And I was sort of like some sort of child protection officer that was brought in. So I had a very, very sort of gently, I was the kind of soft and woolly kind of face of the police force, because I was dealing with sort of traumatized women and children and all of that sort of stuff.
And you
So
enjoyed that, Thusitha? You enjoyed the film screen life as well? Or was it just another gig, as you said?
No, it wasn't just another gig, because they called me in. They go about this, they went about it really, really well. And they wanted me to contribute to the process. So they sort of said, right, we're going to call you in, you're going to sit in front of us, and you're going to tell us what you would like to do. And I was like, whoa. And so then they sort of, that's how the whole Sri Lankan thing started. Because they sort of said, so where are you originally from? Are you, did you grow up here, blah, blah, blah. And so they put the character together. And I got, for the first time in my life, the feeling that I was collaborating with a group of writers who are invisible to me. So they'd be watching what the performances I was giving, and they would start to tailor their writing according to what I was giving them. So the character grew and grew and grew. Because I just thought, one of the things that I find really, really sort of like, I'd love to see it at this time in my life. I thought I'd love to see somebody on screen who was confused a lot of the time about the information that they were getting. Like they didn't have any pat answers to anything, or somebody who always managed to convey some ambiguity about the sort of world that they found themselves in. Because everybody seemed to, especially in the cop shows, everybody seems to know what they're doing all the time. And they're sort of like, really, really sort of on it all the time. And I thought, well, what if you woke up and you were just not in the right frame of mind, and you had to turn up to work and people were shouting these things at you and you just didn't know what to do about it. You didn't know how to proceed. You were often confused. So that was the need I gave myself, and they gave me the space to explore that. So in the early days, it was really good fun, because I was taking far too long to deliver the lines, because I was like so confused. And they were like, Jesus, are you sure you're going to be so high up and be so confused? And I said, yes, I'm sure I would. And they trusted me on that. And they carried that on. And so you could mine lots of comedy, lots of things that you don't normally find. Uncertainty is an incredible thing, and it plagues us all the time. Even if you're in a really high, and especially if you're having to make these, and especially
I was going to say especially if, and yeah. Tracy, let's hope someone listens to us and gets that program down here. I think it's incredible that we have such an actress and we haven't seen it, and people in Australia have seen it. I mean, but anyway, both of you, we've spoken for about 2 hours, and it's a joy for me. Like, it's like seeing the two of you doing so well. Thusitha, internationally, I'm looking forward to Lord of the Rings. Unfortunately, my feelings about turning novels into film, and that's one thing. Like Lord of the Rings, as much as I love the film, I was thinking this is one space where you should not have gone onto screen. But it's very funny, because by the time I realized you were in it, I had already spawned my vitriol about how dare they touch this book. But honestly, can I just say I'm glad, because I still watch the film. It's just that I don't think it can match the book ever. But that's my feeling about any book that turns into film. And I remember one comment you made when I was trying to swallow my own words and backtrack and put plasters. You said no. It was almost like you stolen my phone and texted for me. Something like that. You didn't make me feel bad. That comment, Thusitha, you said, no, I probably feel the same way. Which, are you also a lover of books? And with all your love of acting, do you think we can ever come to that stage? Last question. Where a film can go beyond a book?
Are you asking me or asking Tracy? Sorry.
First you as someone who's been in Lord of the Rings.
One of the books that I thought the person that made that series, and I still don't, well, I can't conjure it to mind, but the person who wrote the screenplay and made the series of Brideshead Revisited, the first time, not the second time. The second time was disastrous. The first time was absolutely, that was an incredible rendition of the book. It delivered it.
I haven't read or seen it. I must Brideshead Revisited, right?
Evelyn Waugh.
Yeah.
And it was the old one with Jeremy Irons and that, you know, and there were some productions, some series, some television and films things that were made in the 80s, 70s and 80s particularly, where it seemed to just, you know, it was just like, but I do agree, by and large, it's a bit of a, it doesn't quite.
I'm looking forward to, because once you turn Lord of the Rings into a series, I'm thinking that gives more space for people to actually, a film would necessarily be edited. I mean, the book is so huge. But
can I also just quickly say, Madhuvashan, it's not actually Lord of the Rings.
Yes, it's before that.
It's a made up. It's a kind of it's written. It's riffing on copious amounts of notes that he made, including sort of languages for various different sets of characters.
Okay.
So it's completely made up, and it's a prequel to it.
Yeah. That gives me hope as well, because Tracy, just your opinion on, given that you are an actor and you didn't ever make the transition to movie, right, or screen?
I did. I've done one film.
Is that?
Funny Boy by
Oh,
Vipa
yes,
Mehta.
of course. I'm sorry, I forgot that. Yes.
But
no, that. But again, I mean, see, every time I love a book deeply, right? I always feel every time I hear it's being turned to film, my question is why? So let's not get there, because it's very personal. Do you think we can ever match a film with a book?
I thought Cloud Atlas, you know, the David Mitchell book. I thought the film actually made the book more accessible.
Okay.
But that's just me.
And also, I guess it depends on the book as well. No? It depends on the writing of the book.
It does depend on the book. I mean, I'm reading something at the moment which is like a screenplay. It's not really a book. You know, it's almost ready, sort of there.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think there was much. I don't know what it is. Like really quickly, but there was so much depth. I find that there is not that, like, the depth is reducing, and I don't know whether it's because people are making stuff to kind of pander to the shorter attention spans of now. I don't know what it is, but the depth doesn't seem to be there somehow. It's all just,
you can't, like, especially when it's really intimate, first person kind of talking and describing an emotion and things like that. That can be very hard sometimes to translate into film.
Absolutely. And anyway, 20 pages could be just 1 second of expression. So how, you know, and I think generally what is accepted as being a fair approximation is To Kill a Mockingbird. They've done quite a good job out of it. But if you read the book, you know, you realize where it hits is different. So this is another conversation for a different day. But Thusitha, let me end by saying I'm looking forward to seeing you in that movie. Tracy, I'm looking forward to seeing where you are going with your production. It's very current. It's very now. And every time I see you speak at Gota Gogama, and you know you bring your bravery there, it's heartening. And it was lovely to have you both together, because I know you're friends. I know the trajectories have been quite similar at some point, and you helped each other in school and all that. And
I didn't help her at all.
No, so the senior, normally the senior helps the junior. But you know, it was it's lovely to kind of, for me, years after, to catch up with the two of you.
She doesn't know how to help me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Often that happens, Tracy. Yes. So some of the very best people are those who don't know. I mean, I would say that about you and your skill as well. And it's great to have you. Thank you again. And I will hopefully see you soon in some other medium. Okay. Bye for now.